On August 24th, 2021, 25-year-old Illinois State University graduate student Jelani Day vanished without a trace, leaving his car abandoned in a dense forest miles from his home. The official police narrative was swift, convenient, and utterly dismissive. They quietly suggested Jelani had suffered a mental break, wandered into the Illinois River, and tragically drowned. But that narrative completely shatters when you look at the secondary, independent autopsy. When Jelani's body was recovered, his brain was missing. His liver and spleen were gone. His jawbone had been completely removed. Today, we are going to tear apart a police investigation so breathtakingly incompetent, so poisoned by systemic apathy and willful blindness that a grieving mother was forced to become the lead detective in her own son's highly blank-lay, suspicious death. This is the timeline they tried to ignore, the impossible evidence they left in the woods, and the horrifying reality of what happens when the justice system simply decides you do not matter. Jelani Day was not a man who was drifting away from his life. He was sprinting toward a bright future. At 25 years old, he was a vibrant, fiercely intelligent graduate student working toward his master's degree in speech pathology. He was a beloved son, a protective brother, and a young man deeply anchored to his family, speaking to his mother, Carmen Bolden Day, every single day. He had no history of mental illness, no known enemies, and no reason to disappear. But on the morning of Tuesday, August 24th, the timeline of Jelani's life takes a sudden, dark, and highly irregular turn. At 7:20 a.m., surveillance footage captures him walking into a facility on the Illinois State University campus. He is wearing a blue button-down shirt, a dark baseball cap, and a lanyard hanging from his pocket. He is acting perfectly normal. 2 hours later, at 9:12 a.m., security cameras pick him up again. This time, at a retail store called Beyond Hello in Bloomington, Illinois. But his appearance has inexplicably changed. He is now wearing entirely different clothes, a white t-shirt, black shorts, and a silver watch. His demeanor in this footage is subtle, but to those who knew him, deeply unsettling. He appears hyper-vigilant, distracted. He buys nothing and quickly leaves. Shortly after, footage shows Jelani's white Chrysler 300 driving away. But look closely at the surveillance video. Following directly behind Jelani's vehicle is an unidentified white car. It mirrors his movements, turning exactly when he turns, shadowing him out of the camera's frame. This is the last time Jelani Day is seen alive. When Jelani failed to show up for his classes and stopped answering his phone, his family instantly knew something was catastrophically wrong. Carmen contacted the Bloomington Police Department, desperate for help. This is where the initial cracks in the system begin to show. The response from law enforcement was practically non-existent. There were no immediate search parties organized by the state. There was no widespread media alert pushed by the authorities. The department treated the disappearance of a highly ambitious, reliable graduate student as a mere administrative inconvenience. They assumed he had simply run off. 2 days later, on August 26th, a breakthrough occurred, but it wasn't because of brilliant detective work. Jelani's white Chrysler 300 was discovered hidden deep within a wooded area in Peru, Illinois, a rural town nearly 60 miles north of his apartment. This was not a place you just stumble upon. To get his car there, it had to be deliberately driven off the main roads and into a secluded, brush-heavy enclave. The state of the vehicle should have instantly triggered a massive, multi-agency homicide investigation. The license plates on Jelani's car had been completely removed, not broken off, unscrewed, and taken. Inside the vehicle, police found the clothes Jelani had been wearing that morning on campus: the blue button-down shirt, the dark hat. But Jelani was nowhere to be found. At this exact moment, standard investigative protocol dictates that the surrounding woods be treated as a major crime scene. Dogs should be brought in. Grid searches should be established. Every inch of that forest should be locked down. Instead, the local authorities in Peru did a cursory sweep, shrugged their shoulders, and essentially left the car and the woods to the elements. They did not secure the perimeter. They did not launch a massive manhunt. Over the next week, the horrifying disparity in how the American justice system allocates its resources became impossible to ignore. At the exact same time Jelani Day was missing, the tragic case of Gabby Petito was dominating every screen, news cycle, and police department in the country. The FBI, local agencies, and international media were moving mountains, utilizing helicopters, drones, and hundreds of personnel to scour remote wilderness. But in the woods of Peru, Illinois, Carmen Bolden Day and her children were walking through the dirt by themselves, begging for help, putting up flyers, and doing the physical labor the police refused to do. On September 4th, 2021, a body was discovered floating near the south bank of the Illinois River, roughly a mile from where Jelani's car had been abandoned. The condition of the remains was horrific. The body had suffered severe decomposition, accelerated by the brutal summer heat and the unforgiving waters of the river. And here is where the utter failure of the system turns from negligent to downright cruel. Despite finding a body near the abandoned car of a missing person, the LaSalle County coroner and local authorities took an agonizing, inexplicable 19 days to positively identify the remains as Jelani Day. For nearly 3 weeks, they left a mother in purgatory, refusing to confirm if the body was her son, citing backlogs and procedural delays. When they finally confirmed it was Jelani, the nightmare only deepened. The local medical examiner's ruling was staggering in its lack of detail. They stated the cause of death was drowning, adding that the manner of death was undetermined. They openly suggested to the public and the family that Jelani must have walked into the river and taken his own life, completely ignoring the removed license plates, the mysterious white car, and the fact that Jelani was an exceptionally strong swimmer who had everything to live for. We have reached the point in this investigation where incompetence ends and a profound, systemic cover-up of reality begins. The local police and the medical examiner wanted this case closed. They wanted the narrative neatly tied up as a tragic suicide or a bizarre accident, so they wouldn't have to dedicate the funds, the time, or the manpower to a complex homicide investigation. But they severely underestimated the ferocious love of a mother. Carmen Bolden Day refused to accept the hollow words of the LaSalle County coroner. She demanded the release of her son's body and hired an independent, private forensic pathologist to conduct a second autopsy. When the results of that second examination came back, they sent shockwaves through the true crime community and exposed a terrifying reality about how local authorities process victims they do not care about. The independent autopsy revealed that Jelani's body had been subjected to horrific, unexplained trauma that the original coroner completely glossed over. His brain was completely missing. His liver, his spleen, and other major organs were absent from his chest cavity. Most chilling of all, his jawbone had been entirely removed or destroyed. When the public caught wind of these gruesome details, outrage exploded. How could a man drown and lose his jawbone? How could his organs be completely missing? The local coroner quickly went into damage control, stating that the organs were not harvested, but had completely liquefied due to the extreme heat and the bacteria in the river water, and that the jawbone was likely lost to aquatic animal scavenging. But whether you believe the coroner's excuse of decomposition or suspect something far more sinister, the fact remains. The initial investigation was a complete sham. The medical examiner didn't thoroughly investigate the loss of the jawbone. They wrote it off. They didn't test the remaining bone fragments for tool marks. They blamed the river. They looked at a mutilated, destroyed body, connected to a car stripped of its license plates, and said, "Nothing to see here." The systemic rot extends far beyond the autopsy table. Because the police utterly failed to secure the woods where Jelani's car was found, crucial evidence was left rotting in the dirt for weeks. It wasn't the Peru Police Department who found the next major clue. It was Jelani's family and private searchers. Weeks after the car was discovered, private searchers combing the woods stumbled upon Jelani's wallet and his ISU lanyard. They were located miles away from the car, in a completely different direction from the river where his body was found. Even more damning, a searcher later found the black shorts and the white t-shirt Jelani was wearing in the Beyond Hello surveillance footage. Think about the sheer impossibility of the police's narrative. For the police theory to be true, Jelani Day would have had to drive an hour away to a random town, manually unscrew his own license plates and hide them, take off his clothes and scatter them miles apart in the dense brush, lose his jawbone, and then walk naked into a river to drown himself. It is physically impossible, It is a fairy tale concocted by a department too lazy or too compromised to hunt a killer. Even when the clothes were found, the police's response was infuriating. They dragged their feet on testing the garments for DNA. When they finally did, the results were heavily degraded because the clothes had been left exposed to rain and sun for over a month, a direct result of the police failing to lock down the area on day one. Who was driving the white car following Jelani? The police have never publicly identified them. Why were his license plates removed? That is a textbook tactic used by car thieves and killers to avoid automatic license plate readers on the highway. Who did Jelani go to meet in Peru, Illinois? Cell phone tower data could have mapped his exact route, showing who he was communicating with in his final hours. But because the police treated it as a runaway case for the first critical 48 hours, that digital trail went cold. The Jelani Day case is a harrowing monument to the dangers of systemic apathy. It exposes a deeply ingrained bias in how missing persons are treated based on their race, their location, and the jurisdiction they vanish in. The Peru police, the Bloomington police, and the LaSalle coroner's office operated with a chilling lack of urgency. They viewed Jelani not as a future doctor, not as a beloved son, but as a problem to be filed away. Eventually, due to massive public pressure and the relentless, exhausting advocacy of Carmen Boldenday, the FBI was forced to step in and form a multi-jurisdictional task force. But by the time the feds arrived, the damage was irreversible. The crime scene had been trampled by weather and time. The physical evidence was degraded. The witnesses had scattered. Jelani Day was murdered. Someone chased him into those woods, stripped his car, scattered his belongings, and ensured he ended up in that river. That killer is still walking free today, heavily shielded by a police department that effectively acted as an accessory after the fact, through their own sheer incompetence. The system did not just fail to find his killer, they practically handed them a head start and a roadmap to get away with it. If you thought the bureaucratic rot in this town was sickening, wait until you hear how the justice system bends over backwards when actual billions of dollars are on the line. Click the video on your screen right now to see the case of a pharmaceutical billionaire who bought his way out of a multi-million-dollar double homicide, and the police who gladly looked the other way.